Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is my other hellish co-host.
Brian, hi.
Welcome, Brian.
How are you?
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. But final season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Like, we're here, we're season 7, you know?
Yeah.
We've lasted longer than some marriages on this podcast.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, are you specifically making a reference to The White Lotus?
I am making a reference to White Lotus, yeah.
Oh, such a good show. Go and watch The White Lotus if you're not. Okay, let's do the Buffy on summary quickly, and then we can move into Bronze Banter, which we will do this week because there's space for it, which is great. So this episode was first aired, season 7, episode 1, Lessons. It was first aired on September the 24th, 2002. It was directed by David Solomon, who last directed Villains. It was written by Joss Whedon, who last wrote Once More with Feeling, which was such a long time ago. Anyway, and here is your Buffy-Ann summary. A girl is killed in Istanbul. Giles teaches Willow to control in England. Buffy trains Dawn, who starts at the new Sunnydale High, built by Xander's firm. Buffy meets trendy black young principal Robin Wood. Dawn and friends fall into their basement and are attacked by zombies, as is Buffy, whom the zombies blame for their deaths. Xander smashes a talisman and the zombies disappear. Wood gives Buffy a counselling job. Buffy meets Spike, who is tormented by apparitions of past dead villains and of Buffy. So,
is he trendy?
Well, yeah, I know. I think two major issues there. These summaries have never ever introduced someone on the basis of their racial identity. I understand if what they're trying to say later on maybe is like, this is notable that he's black, or, you know, like we certainly talk about the fact that, like, you know, we incorporate people's blackness obviously into conversation all the time. This is very othering, I think. You know, when you are presuming that everyone is white and then you only denote when someone is specifically black, it's othering, and it's not great. If you say, like, you know, trendy black young principal, and you say, which is notable as Buffy has basically no black characters.
Yeah.
That's interesting, or that's how you do it.
Maybe that's not as pithy for a summary.
Yeah, I don't like that anyway. So, additionally, you know that thing where it's like the fat brown cat. You know, they're kind of like, there's a very specific order of adjectives. Is that what they are?
Adjectives, yeah. So a way in which sentences in English, we tend to structure the sequencing of adjectives that sounds pleasant and natural, but it's not necessarily, there's not necessarily any rule to support it other than...
Well, there is a rule, and it's incredibly specific, and you sound insane if you read things in any other order, but it's completely like arbitrary, like, and it's incredibly difficult for non-idiomatic English speakers to catch, because if you say, like, the brown fat cat, you sound, it's like, well, that's...
It's not wrong, but it doesn't. It jars.
Yeah. So I'm trying to find out, like, the adjectival, what would you call it? Adjectival order, English, because there's, like, I remember there was a great tweet about it a couple of years ago.
Do you think this comes into play in the Buffy on summary? Do you?
Yeah, I'll tell you now. So they absolutely have to be in this order: opinion, size, age, shape, color, origin, material, purpose, noun. So in that instance where she says trendy black young principal, that's absolutely wrong. It's trendy is the opinion. Young is the... Oh, wait. Yeah, so they put black before young, whereas age should come before color. And I think color in this instance, while you would usually refer to it as, like, red rather than identity, identity, I think, comes after age. But just, like, that immediately sounds wrong when you say trendy black young principal.
Yeah, I think race and color share a seat here, because you will usually say that the last adjective you say before a person in that context would be like blah blah blah, white accountant, or, you know, black, you know,
upwardly mobile young white man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I nearly said black man there, and I was, like, trying to find, like, a non-typical thing, and the fact that I stumbled before saying, oh wait, no, I shouldn't say black man in this instance because upwardly mobile, I was like, whoa, what the fuck is that, like, little racial tick there? Awful. But it was just that just specifically breaks that order. I don't like it.
We have in
I like the racism less. As in, the racism is worse, but also the adjectival order is important.
Yeah, we've managed in the opening moments of season 7 to go down a complex racial rabbit hole.
That sounds about right. Okay, so Joel, how did you? Oh yeah, no, we'll do the Buffy, the bronze banter.
Yeah, so the bronze is open. It's also, I'm going to imagine it's had a lick of paint as well. Maybe there's a what would have been popular around here, like a froyo stand or something, or
oh god,
because it's pre kombucha, pre bubble tea, all that kind of stuff.
I think it's truly the beginning of the like excessive milk drink phase of coffee life, you know,
like variety milks.
Yeah, like I mean, you kind of have your not even variety milks, but you have people really embracing lattes for the first time.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's get a latte no foam in bronze, and what have we been watching this week? We saw some interesting stuff. I think I want to start with. I'm excited out of character to start with the DC film we saw.
I know
the Suicide Squad to be distinguished from Suicide Squad.
Yeah, James Gunn's soft reboot of the Suicide Squad film universe-ish thing. We saw it last week in IMAX, and to be honest, the IMAX was too loud in my experience.
There's a lot of gunfire, and I felt under threat.
Yep. However, and to be fair, cinemas in Ireland, while it sounds like maybe we're being quite like pandemic unaware by going to cinema, I know that in the US there's a lot of people who are saying like, why would you go to the theater at the moment? It's crazy. The cinemas in Ireland are extremely curtailed as by what they can do. Like, people are incredibly spaced incredibly far apart. Masks are supposed to be worn throughout, though I don't think many people do. And
I think to describe to go out now to the cinema is a very different prospect than it would be in, say, the UK or in the US.
Yeah, it's not a crowded cinema, certainly. But so we've been in a couple of times, and it's actually been incredibly pleasant. But yeah, Suicide Squad, really fucking good.
So now, can you remember the name off the top of your head of that YouTuber who did like great essay around
it? Dan Olsen. Who folded ideas. Yeah. Folding ideas, I think, maybe.
Yeah, so a very prolific YouTuber. Many people probably have heard of him.
He really isn't prolific. He releases so few things.
Prolific is actually entirely the wrong word, but like a high profile. Like, people know who he is. Yeah,
sure. He was highly involved in the H-Bomber Guy Donkey Kong stream that had Fortrans for mermaids specifically. Which is
the institution.
Which is a trans youth charity. And which Alexander Ocasio-Cortez featured on, which was just wild.
But he did so this all ties back to he did a great video essay a while back, kind of deconstructing the original Suicide Squad version, and specifically why, from an editing point of view and from a story point of view and from a narrative point of view, it fails as a film. And not just that it's a bad film, but just it doesn't make sense and it doesn't work, and all of these choices that you make in the editing bay and from scripting really affect your experience.
And for context, we went on at length about The Snowman, the Michael Fassbender movie. He did a similar video essay about the editing of The Snowman.
Absolutely, both of which I recommend. I think you have to at some point decide if you are the same way people decide if they are or are not podcast people. At some point you need to decide, can you watch a potentially hour plus video essay?
And I can.
You can, but
speaking of which, ContraPoints had a new video last week and it was so good.
We'll come back to ContraPoints. To trace this back, we won't go into detail on what kind of Dan Olsen covering those videos, but they are actually quite entertaining to watch. They're not particularly heavy, but it's a fascinating contrast with this version of the Suicide Squad, which ostensibly is presented as, you know, in a meta context and real world context, is essentially rebooting this sub franchise, but it is kind of presented as kind of a sequel. But let's not talk about the first one. And by the nature of how, if anyone's unfamiliar, essentially they pull together all these in DC villains under duress to perform superhero type jobs for Black Ops for the US government. The premise allows them to be like, we don't really need to refer to the first one, but it is in many ways. For one thing, let's start off with, it was a lot of fun. It was probably the best DC film I've ever seen.
Yeah, I would agree with. Well, no, obviously the best DC film we've ever seen is The Dark Knight.
Sorry, when it's DC Extended Universe, their current tranche of
1000%. The other one, the only one that I hold in any estimation whatsoever, including Wonder Woman #1, which I didn't like, is Shazam.
Shazam,
a bucket of fun. Yeah,
which was fun, very kid friendly, etc. But this is not kid friendly. It's actually quite a mature filming, but in a weird mix of that. But anyway, where I'm going with this is he put these two films side by side. They are essentially the same film written and done twice. It's the same premise. It's a number of same or similar characters. It's the same exercise repeated, and yet this film works so much better by just tweaking the percentages of where the jokes are, who they're aimed at, who's included in them, how clear the objective is, how early we highlight that, whether we're going with kind of like a crass tone or kind of a shocking tone. Just all these little tiny adjustments that make it like just a far more enjoyable, bombastic, classic superhero cinema experience.
Yeah, it made me feel like, God, I wish that James Gunn had been allowed to Deadpool the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, because those movies I always found to be really... I'm not a huge Guardians of the Galaxy fan. I found the second movie a lot better than the first, which I think is reasonably controversial. But
decisive. Is that what I mean? No, it's not decisive. Divisive
for sure. But this, like, I mean, because like this shows, like, you know, he's genuinely funny, and he's a great visual eye on him, and really good for a funny, weird edit. It was really, really good. And one of the most notable things is, like, Harley Quinn has thankfully retained her Birds of Prey film kind of perspectives, and it's very much about it's very similar to the more recent Harley Quinn TV show in terms of her characterization, and as being like a kind of conflicted but striving towards freedom character.
Yeah, and fundamentally a character who is now works perfectly well on her own, isn't being defined as either with or in opposition to the Joker.
Yeah.
And yeah, just otherwise, in terms of the sell to people who might not be deep in the DC kind of back catalogue, is it's just, when I say DC, it's entirely the extended universe, I mean, in this context, but they've always been dark, shot, dour, washed out, etc. This is a much more colourful film. It's fun. The action sequences are kind of very well communicated.
Kinetic.
Yeah, it's a very interesting mix of violence that I've never seen, and gore that I've never seen quite this way in a different superhero film, but it's just the right side of kept light, I think. And yeah, a great cast of actors. John Cena is in it, another wrestler who's made a pretty good transition to being quite a watchable actor, even though he is a titan of a person. And
Idris Elba is, like, you know, the leading man, and as always, as a leading man, he walks in and he's like, oh, I'm really straight-laced, and then quickly you see that Idris Elba is a goofball.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, also one of the best-looking people who's ever lived, probably.
Yeah, 100%. He's a great inclusion, and yeah, just like likable characters throughout. Peter Capaldi is in it, being an absolute sleazebag for some reason.
It was bizarre. It was bizarre and great, and it's definitely worth a watch if you have any tendency towards, like, fun, violent comic book movies.
Yeah, 100% recommend. Takes a little bit of stomach, I think, for some parts of it, but like definitely worth checking out. And then it's actually a very niche transition in terms of similar bombastic qualities to something this might be the latest we have come to something, in the sense that it is from the 90s. Yeah,
so we talked about it briefly last week, but we started watching the Berserk anime because of the Lady Emily video essay, as I mentioned last week as well. So the Berserk manga began in around 88, I think, or maybe the character originated in 88 or so, and then the anime started in 1997. It ran for 25 episodes, and it was either cancelled or discontinued or something. It's very unclear as to why it didn't continue past this part. It's suggested that potentially the anime series existed to increase the sales of the manga rather than to actually become its own property, kind of thing, you know. But we started watching it, the anime. It is an odd anime. It is shoestring budget. You can see all the places where the corners are cut in terms of the animation budget and what they can actually show. And because of its, like, honesty about that, it's actually very endearing.
Yeah.
And it kind of highlights that I mean, I have started reading the manga because of it, which is my first manga ever, which is very unusual, but I'm absolutely loving it.
A powerful hook, I think, for you to get you to go over that. And I say it as a recommendation. It really just immediately got you over this barrier of, like, how to manga.
And it's very funny, actually. I fell down the stairs the other night and I couldn't sleep because my back was broken. And
this is not a bit. This is fully actually what happened. You do fall down the stairs and your back did not work for several days. Just to verify that.
100%. But I couldn't sleep on the night afterwards because there was no way I could, like, lie down that was in any way comfortable. So I was reading Berserk on my tablet. and I realized that the download I had was like some absolutely fucking bonkers fan translation from the like late 90s, early noughties, like of like very early internet like communal kind of efforts of things. And I like the first three issues I had did not have, like, they were the official translations, and then the fourth was just this nonsense, and it was bizarre. I was like, whoa, this looks like you know, like a 70s dub, or something. And I was like, this is wild.
It's a comic that or not comic, but it's a manga that has threads of, you know, sexuality and sexual expression and homoeroticism and stuff in it. And what was the panel you read that initially clued you in that potentially it wasn't?
What's funny is that the panel I read that made me go like, oh, this is wrong, was a panel where Guts says to
Guts is the main character,
the deuteragonist, I would say. He says to him, are you homo? And I was like, okay, well, this is clearly wrong. When I got to it in the official translation, it did say, are you a homo?
It's better grammar.
But I actually think that's enough to make it the difference of like, no, that one of them is like whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's bizarre. It's worth watching. The anime so far we've been loving. We are more than halfway through it. We're coming towards the end. It's mostly just a character study.
Yeah,
and it's very good.
What sells it to me is it's entirely, for me, unique in terms of animes I've seen. I've seen a lot of the top shelf stuff by now, I think, or touched on a lot of it.
Yeah.
And it's also what we didn't mention is this week is a massive inspiration in many ways for Dark Souls and that kind of style of universe, and I fully see it. It's so like I'm seeing a lot of prototypical versions of things I hold quite dear. And yeah, it's I almost would make the comparison that when you talk about the shoestring budget, but being honest about that and having this core of a character study, it's kind of like earlier seasons, like the first season and first half of second season Buffy, in that sense of kind of like no one's pretending that this actually looks like a robot, but like we're all in this together, which is very, very enjoyable.
Anyway, speaking of Buffy, because we've gone way over for the Buffy Boys bronze banter.
Why is this the one segment that is just a blind spot for you?
Who fucking knows?
Yeah, so I suppose speaking of likable protagonists with iconic weapons, let's go with that.
Yeah, okay.
I do love the Slayer scythe. I don't know if anyone else really cares about it, but I literally put it in the logo for this episode. I just like it so much.
Oh, yeah.
We have lessons, and we're excited. I'm excited. I had a lot of fun with this. So I suppose my context for coming into season 7 generally is, you know, it's all become so muggish because now like we talking about Buffy all the time and we buffer all the time and all that. But I don't think I watched a lot of this season. I remember I definitely came back in for the end, and there's a couple of this stuff around the Turok Hong and some of the kind of the stuff I found kind of cool I dipped back into. I remember being aware that there was something weird happening with Giles. I remember being aware that Spike was now like pathetic or sympathetic or something, but like and there were potentials, but that's kind of it. And then the last couple of episodes, and I knew Nathan Fillion was in there, and actually looking back now, I think potentially Caleb and his misogyny and him blinding Xander, and I have a weird thing about eyes, but I had it was much stronger when I was younger. I think all that kind of made me hang back a little bit, and that's kind of it. So to a certain degree, it feels like a slightly new season Buffy to me coming in, and I thought that this was such a strong opening episode.
Yeah, I totally agree. So my experience with season 7 is like, actually weirdly, I have a much stronger memories of it than I do at season 6, because I don't know what the broadcast situation was, but it was more available to me. Maybe it might have been that we had gotten Chorus by this point, which was the cable
Chorus. That's throwback, yeah.
Which was the cable provider, essentially. I suppose it was cable. It was more digital, a digital box basically. That
I've always assumed when we say chorus, it's not the word chorus as in a musical sense. I always assumed it was an Irish word. Is it?
Yeah, I think it might have been spelled with an chorus.
Chorus, does it mean something in Irish?
I'm trying to think. Nothing crazy. Chorus. I'll look it up. But I think it was just available to me.
Yeah.
At this point, which is just awesome. I suppose it kind of means system, like a chorus, but I don't think that's really what they're trying to communicate with it.
It's like the way we named our monorail system,
Lewis,
which just means speed.
Yeah, though that being said, it is free now, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
So I can't find any translation for it. Anyway, so I think it was just available to me, but I remember the season very well. I think I might have missed a couple of episodes towards the end. So the what's the name again?
Caleb?
Yeah, the Caleb stuff I remember not having seen a huge amount of when I rewatched it years later, or a couple of years later, because I ended up getting a lot of these on VHS in the years preceding Buffy airing for the first time. But I think what happened was that, like, essentially I was just finishing primary school, so I think for a couple of the final episodes I ended up like having my parents like tape it for me because I was away in Wales. Weirdly, we went to Wales for my 6th year class trip. It was really weird. It was kind of great, but yeah, and it was so I actually know season 7 reasonably well comparatively, unusually. So I also really liked this episode. I thought it was very strong. I thought it was very solid. I could feel, unfortunately, the Joss Whedon writing shining through.
I think, I agree, and I think this is where, when focused, where his contributions as a creator are most useful. And I think that if you were to describe to me that the premise of the final season of a long-running TV show, a fan-darling TV show, is to go back to the beginning, revisit things you loved from the first couple of seasons, essentially reinscribe them, and then kind of go to explain what a Slayer actually is and where they come from to a degree, I think is a massive jump the shark moment for me, the idea. But I think it sells it. I think it has a sense of, this episode has a sense of, we don't have to do this, but we've chosen to do this, if you know what I mean. It's not like, it's not that they've run out of ideas. It's like, no, this is like a really interesting way to finally close out this kind of long conversation about who at the end of the day, the show is a conversation about who Buffy Summers is. And it took her a long time to really accept this side of her personality and this massive part of who she is, and I was like really getting into it. And I thought it was like a lot of fun. I think it has some of the things we love about Monster of the Week shows is structure and premise and setting. Season 4 was strong for it insofar as the college stuff we said was really clear, and with this it's like a new high school, and there's things there we know, there's things which might be different. Dong is going to high school, there's a principal, all this kind of stuff I think is really, really compelling. So I think for the first half of the episode, before we even get to the kind of the arc stuff, I think it does a really good job of communicating that they can touch on what worked before, but also kind of introduce, our characters are older and they're going into it fully like, okay, well, which of the fucking 10 things that was going to kill us is it here? And let's immediately look around this place for clues.
It's a weird one. So I think if you're thinking about the parallels with season 1, like in some ways I kind of feel like I think this season might have been a little better if they actually fully committed to the returning to the school. Like I think the Buffy house as the
base of operations,
it's uninspired in every way. I think if you had gotten Buffy here and made Buffy the Giles when you have potentials coming in, bring them into the school and maybe exploring like small adventures they have and stuff like this, in a way to kind of like feel like you are really basing your final season on a continuity rather than kind of like saying goodbye to characters. I think could have been really strong. Like imagine if I think that's kind of what the suggestion. I think if you watch this episode without knowing where Buffy goes, your experience might be to feel like, oh, what's going to happen next is that Buffy is going to be Giles for this season to some new young people who are experiencing the Hellmouth terrifying awfulness.
Well, we literally have the premise at the end of the episode that Dong and the two normies that she helps rescue, and I think is it Buffy that says to them, you guys better stick together now, that kind of thing. So it's one of these things that happens on these shows where it's like you're fully implying that they will actually stick together and be the new Xander and Willow or whatever.
Exactly. I mean, like it's very clearly like they're supposed to be Xander and Willow parallels in that situation. So it's an interesting one. It doesn't work out that way, and I understand why it doesn't, but and I do sometimes dislike the militaristic vibes of season 7. Like for me, season 7 returns to Whedon's obsession with military and structures and captains and all this stuff, which
militant women as well specifically is
which you'll see a lot in stuff like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and stuff like that, which I have no interest in whatsoever.
What the season does have is absolutely chock full of characters. It's like stuff to the brim with characters. So I think why you can't go nearly as small as maybe you might be suggesting.
100%. And season 6 introduces basically no new characters. The only new character it introduces, I would say, is Andrew.
Yeah. Who?
And Clem. Apart from that, like, basically known, maybe like in Rack. I mean, like, come on. Season 7, you get tons of new characters. You get your Cassie, who's a very notable character, I think, for the show. You get so many like interesting potentials. Kennedy, who I'm like, I think people aren't in love with Kennedy necessarily, but we'll get to that when we get to it. You get your Caleb, you get your Robin Woods, who I quite like, stuff like that. So I'm excited to see more.
Faith comes back, which I think is like a big, not only am I looking forward to, but like that's a massive narrative energy you put into an episode. So there's just so much going on. Yeah,
there is. So yeah, and I think another parallel that is very clearly drawn in this episode is the opening scene. So in Istanbul, there's a girl being hunted down by some cloaked figures and eventually thrown off a building and stabbed. And I think it is designed, and I'm not sure if it's been noted specifically by Whedon, but it's, I think, very notable to contrast that with the Welcome to the Hellmouth opener, which has Darla and a guy going into a school, and instead of showing the girl as being this vulnerable person who gets eventually like cut down in the prime of her life kind of thing, traditional horror content, you have her being the evil. And I think this episode kind of like brings it back to its roots of, oh, there is something doing this to girls and we have to stop this, and it's kind of a nice response to the issue of Buffy, which is like, oh, you're empowering women, and also we need to acknowledge that women do experience a heightened degree of violence and victimization.
100%, because
in the world.
100%, and when I think having that structure of seeing these various potentials across the world being threatened and coming together, like the femininity of the Slayer role is the Slayer lineage. And it's intertwined this with women and all that is obviously so fundamental to what it is, and it can't be underestimated that the theme of this is that there is a systemic kind of amorphous but massive force that is malevolent, that is targeting not a competing force but individual women.
Yeah.
And it's really only when they can come together that they start to like be able to combat that, which I think is, it's right there. It's right there on the headline. Yeah.
How did you feel about Dawn in this episode?
I liked Dawn in this episode. I thought she, I think her role and what she's doing at the moment is to be, well, not to be quite as on the nose as this, but like give us Buffy at 16 a little bit. She's quippy in the way that Buffy was, where it's not at anyone's expense really. And I really liked the pieces where I definitely like her taking a role and trying to learn how to defend herself, and I love the scene at the start where Buffy is like, she's like pushing back against Buffy's criticism. Buffy's like, no, you actually did really well, and I thought that was like a nice progression of that relationship. I loved her, Dawn in the basement trying to like protect the other two, and kind of thinking, okay, let's take these bricks, let's put it into this handbag, let's like really think about how we.
And there's a really nice note there where Buffy takes that bag of bricks right afterwards and uses that herself, because it's like, it's a well improvised weapon that will be useful.
Yeah, and what we're saying, I think it's a useful thing that you said with Dawn as a character who isn't and doesn't become a potential, and is that like, it's not. When you have so many empowered characters in this season, you don't want to suggest the idea that what makes them powerful is their mystical strength. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a tool. But like,
Dawn is, I mean, like, let's be real. Dawn is like accruing more obtained skills and self-driven skills than Xander ever does throughout the whole show. Like, Dawn is actively looking to learn how to protect herself, to fight, to contribute, and to help others around her, whereas Xander only ever like was interested in power in the sense that he didn't have it.
Yeah.
It's very notable. Like
it's really about power, isn't it?
Anyway, I really like Michelle. I thought Michelle Trachtenberg was absolutely like on fire in this episode. She's just so. I really gravitated towards her in this rewatch of this show this time around. I think she does a great job. I think she had a really rough like role to play.
Yeah.
And what she does with it is actually like convincing, genuine, and soft, and quite like, I don't know, it's really nicely balanced. I think she's just a very compelling actor, and she's
she just looks so youthful and beautiful in this episode as well. I hate being one of those people who like sees women as like, you know, only having value in their beauty. I really don't try to do that, but she looks genuinely.
She also has value in it. Yeah, she is also a positive. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like she looks absolutely stunning in this episode. Yeah. So yeah, power. I mean, like the final scene of the episode is supposed to be a coda to the opening scene post after the cold open, which is Buffy and Dawn fighting together, and Buffy saying, "This strength is not the issue here; it's power." Mm-hmm. And this is all reflected then in the closing scene, which is with Spike being berated by the first, I would say. Tormented by the first, who has appeared and is giving Spike a lecture on power. For one thing, the production element of that, of bringing every big bad back, stunning.
Yeah.
Incredible decision, incredible they're able to pull it off.
I think underrated, because it's like a quieter moment when people talk about great moments in Buffy, but it's like, I think it's absolutely thrilling. It's like, what is happening here, you know?
I mean, you would just lose your fucking mind
if
you didn't know this was coming.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. And I think it communicates, you know, without being hyperbolic, it communicates the heightened stakes. Mm-hmm. It really says, like, in the same way that Glory as a god was such an escalation, I think this really says, what is this, you know? Will it be something we can fight in any way? And I think that it's such an interesting choice to have the antagonist of the whole final season to like be all the current and preceding characters, you know, because it's like a trick of the light that they do, because if you think about it as a viewer, you never see the first, like maybe you see like a CGI thing at some point, but like
I don't think you do see any representation of the first, even in the under hell area.
No, exactly. Like you never like you've been tricked into thinking you've seen a monster when you've just seen a lot of actors you already know, and making it so frequently appear as Buffy herself is like
genius, I guarantee the comic books have shown the face of the first at some point.
Not that I think of, actually, but the first, like, just to go back, like, in Amends, the first is shown.
Yeah.
And they generally refer to that. There was actually a couple, at least one, if not two, video games before season 7, which were like, gosh, remember that weird episode about the first? Let's do a game about that. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it was ever any intention for this to be where it was going to, but I think it's legitimate to look back and say, oh, that's something we can develop further. That's not dishonest, I think.
And if you're a more casual Buffy viewer or Buffy Boys listener, the first does appear in the season 3 episode Amends, where Angel Jesus like attempts suicide kind of via the sunrise.
It torments him with visions of people that he's killed, essentially.
Mostly as Jenny Calendar, I think, is the primary like visual communicator of that. I didn't like that episode, but I think the first is a well done villain, certainly this season. And Spike just generally, I think James Marsters did a pretty good job here. I think he looks like crazed.
Yeah, I think he transitions to this this is probably like the 5th version of Spike he's played in some ways. You know,
that's so true.
Because like if you have William, you have season 2 Spike, you have chipped Spike, you have in Love Spike, which is kind of like chip 0.5,
and grown out hair slightly,
and not just aesthetically, but like and obviously this is him completely
Rasa Spike, like blue, or what was it, something blue Spike. I mean, like there are so many Spikes.
Yeah, exactly. So but this he plays this differently again. Like this is really it's actually a great thing he does, because it's the first time he plays a version of the character that isn't self-involved.
It's out of control,
and really can't help Buffy, and doesn't know, and like it's great to put as the character who is, we say consistently, is the truth teller in the group, and now he knows about the first, and he knows this is happening, but he won't be believed, you know,
and can't communicate it.
So I think there's some interesting progression there, and I think his growing out kind of permed hair is quite funny as well.
So obviously he didn't get access to bleach in the depths of Africa, unfortunately, so he couldn't get his roots done, and he's tried to scratch out his soul. It's quite sad.
Yeah, it's quite gothic in kind of the classic sense, I think.
Like Arches.
Yeah, like Arches, Brian. So I think it sets up it sets up the season very well. And then I suppose something which is useful to talk about is we have a couple of characters who are separated from the group. So we have on the smaller scale, so as you know, we might note this is the smallest that the core Scooby Gang is at any point during the 7 seasons. We have Anya and Halfrick, who have, once again, Anya has a scene by herself, which is odd. And talking about the fact that
her name's Anya now.
Oh, very good. Actually, it's a good reference. Talking about the fact that she's lost her teeth essentially as a vengeance demon, and it's an absolute sizzler of a line where Halfrick's trying to convince her that she, everyone knows she's lost her edge, and Anya's like, "What is this, an intervention? Shouldn't all my demon friends be here?" And Halfrick's like, "Oh, honey, they are."
Oh, vicious.
So good. And then we have Willow and Giles in England, in Devon, presumably.
Is it Devon? I thought it was
or the Cotswolds,
Somerset.
Somerset, I don't know.
Or maybe Devon is in Somerset, I don't know.
Yeah, I absolutely, unfortunately, don't know that. But there's 3 significant references.
If you asked me to point to London on a map, can't do it. I remember that time we were in Wales and we were in history museum, natural history museum, and we
I
were
hate
like,
where this is going.
Yeah, and we were like, I was like, Joel, where is Wales in the UK? And there was a map showing, and I was like, is that where Wales is? And we were like, oh crap,
that's not where we thought we were in the world. There's some specific references to England throughout the franchise. There's the Devon Coven is where Giles got his power in the end of the last season.
That would make sense.
This potentially isn't Somerset, but also
Somerset is where Anthony Stewart Head's house is. That's where I'm getting that.
Yeah, and also in Angel they talk about the fact that the other side goes the hole in the world where the old ones sleep now is in the Cotswolds. That's kind of all my head. But we have basically Willow kind of dealing with the aftermath of season 6, and there's some really interesting conversations there, I think, around that. Giles explicitly says that magic is no longer a hobby nor an addiction. Magic is inside of her, and she is the custodian of it. She can't be separated from it.
Effectively, completely bring an end to the addiction storyline. Which, thank fucking Christ.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very tender, sad little conversation, because what Willow says is like, I want to be Willow again.
Yeah.
And he says, you always are. And it's kind of like, it's sad because what he's saying is you have to deal with the fact that you did those things.
Yeah, you can't get away from it. It wasn't someone else. Yeah,
exactly. Which is kind of what we wanted to write in season 6, but they didn't quite have the teeth to write it in the end. But Alison Hannigan, stunning performance in this. She's so sad and mournful. No reference to Tara though. I really could have done with a couple of references to Tara. I think that would have been good writing. Apart from that, you do she refers to him as Dumbledore as well, which is kind of nice, which is that you're supposed to be angry at me and instead you love me. And just Anthony Stewart Head really playing a very warm and very consolatory, is that a word? Consolatory character. It's all very intriguing. I find that scene very sad and good, I must say.
Yeah, and I like this suspense of her feeling something terrible and ancient coming through the earth. Yeah, and the classic almost Evil Dead style horror shot of them zooming back through the house, being like, "What is it? Yeah, something is happening." Yeah.
The photography in this episode was quite experimental and very unusual for a Buffy episode. I think they always have a bit more of a budget for the season openers.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I no major issue with it.
Yeah, and I say kind of the last introduction or element worth talking about at the moment is obviously the introduction of Principal Woods. And as the
final person added to the main credits, I think.
Does he end up in main credits?
I believe so.
Interesting. So I say and notable because, as we said, as a show that over the course of 7 seasons has either had a lack of racial diversity or an issue often in its representation of racially diverse characters. But we do have a character here for season 7 who... We're
going to have to be careful because I keep calling him Robin Woods and his name's Robin Wood.
Robin Wood, okay. Yeah. We have essentially a main character or a significantly recurring character for season 7 who is black and is linked to this specific significant black storyline that's been on the show before, and is, I would say, overall positively portrayed. But then it's how you look at that now and you know, him being the only character that kind of carries this burden and kind of, you know, etc., all that kind of stuff.
I would say with all that, even all that, he is the I would say he's significantly better written, given much more care as a character than Gunn is in Angel. So for my money's worth, he is like not only just a worthy inclusion in the sense that, like, obviously I can't remember his actor's name, but
D.B. Woodside.
D.B. Woodside, excellent actor, brings a lot of warmth and like kind of menacing confidence to the role. And
the threat of being able to do the Slayer speak.
Exactly. Yeah. I just find him to be a very I find him to be a very useful character and very good character.
Yeah.
I very much like his inclusion in the season.
And to be fair, something which I've overlooked because season 7, as I said, is not necessarily my wheelhouse. The Potentials have some broader representation in their group, don't they? Yeah. So I think it's an interesting one to look at and give our expert opinions on the race problem in America.
Yeah.
In retrospect, but yeah, no, I think I'm glad he's here, and I think he is a good addition, and something which I think we can say kind of adds kind of a specific tempo to the season in terms of its kind of like its palette
for sure
of themes. And yeah, I suppose that the thing here at the moment just is that he is presented as a threat, that he knows about Buffy for some reason, this ominous school board, which kind of sounds like the mayor, do you know what I mean? It's like it's said to look up on her file. And I think we said that it doesn't make it explicitly clear in the episode who actually invoked the zombies.
The talisman, yeah, no.
Who we didn't mention, I think, actually at all so
yeah,
far.
so there's a talisman, there's some people who Buffy kind of like left to die, they think, but she's like, I don't give a shit what you think.
Yeah,
thanks.
I really enjoyed that. She's like, fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. As if like Buffy should like regret people who like fell by the wayside and died in that situation when she was probably saving someone else, or maybe just having lunch. Yeah. People are late having lunch. Anyway, we never find out who left the talisman there. It's never clarified in the show. I saw a couple of Reddit threads being like, what the fuck? Who did this? People were like, oh, maybe it was Andrew under the control of the First. Other people being like, I think it's probably supposed to be Robin Woods.
I think it makes sense as Robin Woods.
I would agree in the sense that he is trying to contrive a situation where Buffy does become the counselor, and it kind of works. It's a very chaotic way to control her, but he is trying to get her into this counselor role. Yeah. So, Joel, should we move into the dusting?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So a couple of Buffy bits for you there. D.B. Woodside is also in Parenthood and Lucifer. We haven't watched Lucifer. I know, we know some people who love it and other people who hate it, I think.
I think he plays one of the antagonists. I think he's like Archangel Michael or something.
Oh, cool. The UK scenes were indeed shot in Anthony Head's house in Somerset, and the horse that's shown in the background is his horse Otto. Presumably the horse... Sorry, go on. You can tell your...
Yes, I think that... A few seasons back, we talked about a Twitter thread, which at the time was doing the rounds on Twitter again, which was in relation to a UK-based poet, Jay Hume, who is a Buffy fan and a trans man, and who had, prior to transitioning, had gotten all this stuff signed by Anthony Stewart Head, and kind of had looked up to Giles and Anthony Stewart Head as like this, like, you know, figure of masculinity, you know, positive male figure and all that kind of stuff. And that when Anthony Stewart Head kind of, they found out that he had transitioned and all his stuff essentially, you know, ideally needed to be re-signed, etc.
Ascribed to his chosen name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anthony Stewart Head took this guy Jay Hume out to this farm. He spent the day with, I think, Anthony Stewart Head's wife and their horses. And yeah, Jay Hume has gone to write a lot of really interesting stuff about masculinity and what it means to be a positive part of that, rather than rejecting it, and has said that Anthony Stewart Head has been this like real ideal of like how to be a good man, essentially. Yeah.
And as far as I'm aware, Anthony Stewart Head did write the foreword for one of his poetry books.
Yeah, he did, like after the fact, we first talked about it.
It is the absolute most wonderful thing you can read about a warm figure from your childhood, is finding out that they are not only just like trans inclusive or queer inclusive, that they are actively will support the...
Yeah, like it's one thing to say, oh, I'm relieved to see in retrospect to say,
like, you mean Sarah Michelle Gellar, not homophobic, loves the gays.
Exactly. So it's great to see that it touched that, and it's a whole other step to be like bring a civilian out to his farm and like you'd be positive and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
stop.
So anyway, it's a wonderful story. But yeah, this is the farm in question.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple other ones. Callie Rocha, who plays Halfrick, apparently only had one day because she was shooting another TV show. So she had one day to shoot all of her scenes for this season. So
right.
Yeah, so that scene where she was shooting with Anya was shot in the same one a day as the scenes in Selfless, which come later on in the season, and it's a great episode. As we noted, the Scooby Gang is currently at its lowest member count ever at 3 members, which is quite upsetting. And Willow refers to getting help from Miss Harkness, which is a Agatha Harkness reference, as we have experienced extensively recently in WandaVision. Yeah. Do you have any Buffy Bits, Joe?
Yeah, so we see one of the things that Dawn references when she's fighting the vampire in the opening scene is using Tai Chi to overpower him, which I think is like the show's obsession with Tai Chi. It's like a thing that people were doing at the time, obviously, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting when Halford mentioned that Anya's reticence is the talk of the order. It's like, what order? What are you referencing? What order is this? Yeah.
Order of Vengeance, presumably.
Yeah, potentially.
What's his name? The
Hoffren.
Hoffren. Maybe the Hoffren's order?
Yeah, but he's the head of the lower beings. It's the whole thing. And then I really enjoyed the exchange where Buffy is like, oh, I have to talk to my dog walker about my dogs, and she's like, they're all dead. And then Robin is like, all your dogs died. it's just stupid, but enjoyable. And yeah, I think otherwise, just as in terms of Buffy Bits, we do see kind of the reinscription of kind of the high school, and specifically Xander pointing out, and what I actually thought was quite cool seeing where he overlays the 2 blueprints on the window, shows that the principal's office is directly over the Hellmouth.
Yeah. Great. Okay, fashion notes. So I quite liked Buffy's longer hair. I think I slightly prefer the bob-ish cut that she had in the previous season. Willow looks incredible in the episode. I loved her brown shearling jacket. I thought it looked wonderful. And I absolutely hated the kind of very fancy kind of like Victorian coat on Giles.
You think like his like horse walking coat? I liked it.
Hated it. I thought Xander looked generally well enough, but I really hate the American style of suits, especially at this time where suits were meant to be worn boxy and overbig.
Massive breasted suits kind of thing.
Yeah, but such.
I feel like I could phrase that better.
and all the primary color shirts
and ties.
Awful. I loved how Anya looked. Actually, I liked her sheer lacy blouse. I thought it looked just quite like cool, and I quite like her brown hair. I think she looks very very cool, very mature. And I quite liked Michelle Trachtenberg's like honey highlights in her hair. I think those are new, and she just looked very cool. And I was also wondering, where did Spike get his new black shirt? Because that's not what he was wearing when he was in Africa. Maybe he bought it or stole it on the way back.
Yeah.
And just like, kept an eye out for like, oh, there's an all black shirt. I'm going to steal that.
Well, actually, Brian, with Stitch Fix, you could have a box of curated,
I've never listened to a podcast that specifically had that, but I get the meaning.
Do you think if we were sponsored, we could do the copy voice, kind of like next from Drop Chef? I really enjoyed it.
I often have wondered this because of how successful we've been and how much we've actually had to reject offers of sponsorship
on principle. But
but like, I mean, if we were to do it, like, it's just so funny because like everything that we communicate is anti that kind of thing. And so much of the podcasts I listen to, which are great, are anti that kind of thing of like advertising and manipulation and kind of like, messy capitalism. And yet they all participate in the advertising revenue kind of thing. Interesting. Anyway, and the final shot of the episode with Sarah Michelle Gellar as the first, with Buffy saying it's all about power. Stunning. She looked incredible, but also it was just menacing to the extreme. Fucking loved it.
Yeah.
Do you have any fashion notes, Joe?
Yeah, I just add to that Michelle Trachtenberg's look, for whatever reason, reminded me of Harriet the Spy specifically. I had a whole vibe of that.
Apparently she wasn't allowed to wear black at any previous time during her portrayal of her to keep her looking youthful. So this was her basically being like, please let me wear some black, and that was this,
Yeah. I liked her two compatriots, kind of the early noughties now. Kind of, I think your man was wearing double denim and a vest, and the girl had like it was like a dress over a jumper and a whole
maroon lipstick.
Yeah, it was a lot, and I enjoyed it.
I really hate though that, like, I mean, you know, that kind of like the trope of the side, the potential group, like where you're kind of suggesting, oh, maybe there are other instances of this kind of thing, maybe other Scooby gangs could be formed, etc. And they always have more diversity than the actual group. Yeah. So like, you know, having a Latino guy in it is just like, it's like, yeah, but you would never do that for the actual group, would you? Yeah.
No, right. That is a trend, I think, at the time. Yeah. And lastly, I would say, out of, I think, all of the throwback villains, Glory is wearing a different red dress. Oh. It looks very nice on Claire Kramer.
Actually, I meant to note the mayor, Harry Dean
Gronger, which we never quite learned how to pronounce it. Yeah.
But he shot his part months later, which is why he doesn't really transition into the other character, the other big bads, the way the other ones do. So his was done months later in front of a green screen.
Yeah, and that being said, I don't think it takes anything away from the scene. No. Okay, so death count.
Please.
So we have the vampire who gets his foot stuck on the root, Paletti, in the opening scene, beheaded with a sword by Buffy.
Which we know that had an incredible bit of, not either CGI or practical effect, but when Buffy lifts him out of the grave, there must have been wires on him or something, but they were perfectly edited out. We were like, this is really seamless.
Yeah, it just looks real. And the choreography, I think, generally, we said kind of through it was pretty.
Yeah,
pretty
I think the season 7 choreography for the fight scenes is just really good.
Yeah. We also have the 3 manifest spirits dispelled when Xander smashes the talisman. And we had the potential Slayer in Istanbul in the opening scene.
Not Constantinople.
No, not at all. Which I think I'd always assumed was a Turkish Slayer, but she could just have been there, I suppose. But I think it's implied that she meant to be.
You know, she could have just be there because potentials are often brought to places with their
watchers.
With their watchers, I mean their proto watchers. Yeah. What happens when a Slayer? Okay. So let's say with what's her name? Season 2. Kendra. Let's say if Kendra hadn't been called, she has her watcher. Her watchers have been training her for decades at this point, or decade and a half. What if she gets to the age of like 22 and she hasn't been called, and it's like, oh, you're definitely not going to get called? Does she just get sent out into the wilderness?
I think there's a lot of interesting answers you could give to that, but I think
probably because, like, you know, the concept of, like, you know, disposable girls is very much part of this season.
Yeah, you've took the words out of my mouth. I think with the Watchers Council being as they are, I don't think they think about that.
No.
And you everything about the early Watchers Council we see around that time is kind of like that the diaries stop when the Slayer dies, essentially, and that they do the Cruciamentium and all this kind of stuff. I think they just turn them out on the street with all this dark knowledge that they can do nothing with.
Yeah, and with that, I would say that it's not impossible that she just has a Watcher who's brought her to Istanbul, you know, as in, but like also she could just be a Turkish Slayer for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or potential. Okay, and do you have a rating for me, Joel?
Yeah, I think I'll give this episode 9.2 basement perms.
Okay, great. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I just I kind of have nothing bad to say about it as an episode. I think as a standalone episode, it works well. I think as a premiere of a season and to set the tone for the season, works really well.
I think it might be the best season premiere.
Yeah, it has some great punchy moments in it. I think in, you know, up and down places over the season, but I think kind of up from here. I think this is like a pod. I think it's, and also coming off of the end of season 6, I think this is a really good kind of reset.
Yeah. I think the only season opener that I could suggest is as strong as it potentially is The Freshman, which is a great season opener. And also Bargaining, obviously being very strong and scary, but maybe missing something special. I'm going to give it 8.8 sad guitar duos out of 10. I really liked it as well. I don't think it's necessarily transcendent, but I thought it did everything right. It did everything I needed it to. It's a really strong season opener. I'm intrigued. I'm saddened knowing that there's some of the season 7 stuff that just doesn't land, and that kind of feels rushed and not thought through. But I'm also excited for the season. Yeah. And I'm really excited to look at it again. I think it's a very structured season with a lot of very interesting concepts. So I'm really interested to get down in the weeds with those.
Fun.
Okay, should we do the Cordelia Chase, Joe?
Yep. Cordelia Chase over on Buffy, season 4, Buffy episode 1, Deep Down.
No, not at all. Over on Angel, season 4 of Angel, episode 1.
He's
said Buffy twice.
Well, you know,
You are the only person in this room who's ever made a mistake with what you say.
sure. Deep down. And yeah, so we have a season opener, and really the arc of this season is Conger's role in the apocalypse and Cordelia eventually coming back from the higher planes and being a vessel for Jasmine, who is a rogue, one of the good guys, a rogue power that be, power that is. And Jasmine's plan is to use Cordelia and Conger to bring all his confluence together so that she can save the earth by imposing no free will and peace and bliss for all time. Played by Gina Torres. That's what we're going
Well
with.
played by Gina Torres.
Yeah.
I like Gina Torres. Whenever she turns up in something, I'm happy.
Yeah. So this episode is kind of really the start of setting that stage. I think it's quite similar to a lot of previous Buffy and Angel opener episodes, where it's actually kind of cleaning up the previous season. So we see like a lot of kind of dark, broody moments from Wesley. Wesley spent 3 months have passed, and as I said, I think it's always funny that they make a point of saying that in between seasons the summer has passed to align with real life, even though within the season there's no continuity for time in the same way, week to week. But Wesley spent the time trying to find Angel. He does this by having kidnapped Justine, locked her in a cage in his closet with a bucket for her excrement and all this kind of stuff. And just like, they often portray this as the line between good and evil has become so blurred and he's almost at the edge. It's like, no, he is torturing this woman. Like, he is, by Buffy standards, evil. Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's some reasonably interesting concepts there and visuals in terms of like searching for the coffin down in the deeps. He is sleeping with Lila from Wolfram and Hart, and it's kind of like it gives him something to do, like narratively, while he's off by himself there. We see from Angel's perspective, it's kind of another episode about Angel that he doesn't talk in for most of it, if you know what I mean. But we see him having various interesting dream sequences where he's either having a wonderful meal in the middle of the hotel,
very a la the Thanksgiving scene from The Gift.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of symbolic, and Cordelia is there and Wesley and Lauren is there, etc. And we see him fighting with Conger one dream sequence and then killing him, you know, and it's all quite provocative in that way. And I think that probably what works again, unfortunately, the least in it is it leaves Angel investigations being Gunn, Freg, and Conger, who are not three characters who have a chemistry of any description. No. Conger is trying to maintain the idea that this is like, you know, he's looking for his dad while also killing any leagues to finding Angel. And we also see that in Wolfram and Hart, there's a setup that Lila is going to be pushed out by the current head of the Angel department, whose name I knew up until about 10 seconds ago. I can't remember. But
Howard?
No, it's like, you know, something like that. But she basically, which I think is kind of a reasonably strong scene insofar as she's kind of being put down and shamed for sleeping with Wesley, for being kind of I think really the weak woman in the department, and the white guy is the head of the department, and Gavin Park, who's her rival, are kind of conspiring to push her out. And instead of kind of falling for that, she kind of tears him shred metaphorically in the meeting, and then waits for him to use the word head in a sentence, and then presses the button to decapitate him and takes over the department, which I think works because it consolidates. It's not like, who are all these fucking people anymore, it's just like Lila is Wolfram and Hart. I think that works. Wesley finds Angel, brings him back, lets Justine go and gives her some trite words about redemption or whatever, and we never see that character again. She's gone. That's it.
Right.
And then there is actually
back in the comics.
No, actually, I don't think so. I'll look into that. And there's some interesting tension with Conger, because there is that moment where they realize Conger has turned, and they manage to tase him and tie them up, and Fred goes absolute fucking ham on him, like tases him and beaks it's like slapping him, which is weird. And then there's a moment where he gets out, and they're like, where is this super strong person, etc. You know, Angel comes back, stops him, puts him down, and then throws him out onto the street. So I thought I don't love where this season goes, but I thought that as a setup, it worked reasonably well. The thing that I would kind of, I suppose, write out of canon in retrospect, which helps for a lot of this season, and which I don't like, is that I don't agree that Jasmine is supposedly sets up everything right back to Angel leaving Sunnydale.
Yeah, potentially bringing him back from
potentially being potentially it's implied that she might have been the one who brought him back from hell, because that is actually never explained in Angel why he got sent back, or in Buffy, sorry, why he got sent back. Not that it needs to be, but they give that explanation, so I kind of disregard that. But as an episode of the setup, I thought it worked pretty well, and there's some good moments in it. So yeah, probably about 7 failed feminist gestures.
I'm going to go for 6 failed feminist gestures. I felt it was it spent so much time wrapping up the previous season, so much time focusing on Connor and Fred and Gunn, and just nothing going on there. Though realistically, Fred is a pretty burgeoning character. She's I think Amy Acker is doing an incredible job with the kind of bad writing she's getting at the moment. I really liked the David Boreanaz scenes, and I quite liked where he the power he kind of takes with it. And I thought there were too many Lila scenes, honestly. Yeah. They could have been done with 2 fewer Lila scenes. Anyway, whatever. So 6 failed feminist gestures.
Great. So that comes to the end of our first episode of the last season of Buffy.
Weird.
So thanks once again for joining us. We've gotten some great feedback from people, great suggestions in terms of what we want to do after season 7, which has been really useful.
It's really nice, because we're saying, oh, we're planning to do something after season 7 to wrap up Angel season 5, and 2 or 3 people tweeted us being yes, please do, and it's kind of oh, you want more episodes? That's
really nice.
It's kind of nice, kind of nice. It's specifically a massive compliment.
Really appreciate it.
Anyway,
so thanks so much for joining us, and we're here on this next stage of our wild ride together. So if you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Tell your friends, and tell the ghosts you have from high school, literal or emotional, and we will see you next time on Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys. See yous.
Tschüss.